Hello and welcome to Session 4.
This session, we'll be talking about the power of forgiveness. As we begin, we're going to hear from the people we interviewed around the world. We asked them two questions. How important is it to say sorry to one another? And how important is forgiveness in marriage?
It is important to say sorry. Men don't apologize as much as women do. That's what I find.
I don't think it's difficult to say you're sorry. You know, that's just being a man.
I think it's difficult to say you're sorry just because...
You say you're sorry?
He said that in our wedding speech. He said he would never say sorry.
I don't say sorry first. I take ages because I'm stubborn. But you regret it afterwards and you think, why didn't I just say sorry then, in the beginning, and admit it? But you never do.
If people find it difficult to say that they're sorry, then a lot of people have pride issues. So I think that comes in the way of relationships.
I never say I'm sorry, ever. It rarely happens. And I don't like to do it because then it has to do with pride.
Even if I'm not wrong, I'll still say sorry just to resolve things. It's all about being the bigger man.
When you've done that, you're done.
It's important to say sorry, but only if you mean it. If you say sorry, you're not meaning it, then you're just a pointless human being.
It really doesn't matter who says sorry, as long as you're able to leave everything behind from that point on. I think the job is done.
If we're sorry about anything, just don't be too big not to say sorry. And that's it, isn't it? Never heard it off the wife yet, mind, but you might do it, me.
It's really important to forgive the person you love, because that makes everything right again, I guess.
Without forgiveness, I don't think people can actually live with each other.
Some things just can't be forgiven, like cheating and extreme things.
When you forgive, that cuts the whole story. It ends everything.
The best way to learn how to forgive somebody is practicing it.
If you love one another, you forgive.
Some things are very difficult to forgive. I actually think you have a more forgiving nature than I do. Really.
I think you're right.
To say sorry to and forgive each other is so important because nobody is perfect. We'll all hurt our partner, often unintentionally, and sometimes we aren't even aware of what we've done.
The hurt can be caused by the way we speak, such as when a husband sees his wife's upset and says, "What's the matter with you now?"
Or a wife rolls her eyes as her husband is doing his best to park the car and on his fourth attempt says, "What on earth are you doing?" In any marriage, there'll be small and big ways we upset each other, but they all need to be addressed.
Obviously, it's extremely important to be able to forgive in marriage and move on. I think from my side, I might kind of get stressed out about something and flip out. And I think to make sure that we're all okay again, I have to apologise. And Rhoda's very good at forgiving me, fortunately. So yeah, it's an absolute, from my side particularly, it's an essential part of our marriage that Rhoda's able to forgive me about things that I do wrong in the kind of heat of the moment or whatever. So yeah, that's it's really important.
I think that the reason forgiveness is so important is because we're both human at the end of the day, and it wouldn't matter how many marriage courses we went on, we'd still be making mistakes. So to recognise that both of us know how to forgive is really key. And often we look back at times when we were stressed with each other and we remember feeling stressed with each other, but we know we've forgiven each other because we can't actually remember what the argument was about.
The level of the hurt ranges all the way from the minor ways we upset each other to the devastation caused by an affair or another major breakdown in trust.
Being able to deal with hurt is vital if we're going to build and maintain closeness. This diagram shows why. Healthy relationships grow through trust and openness. Where trust exists, we're able to be open about our deepest feelings. We allow each other into our inner world to know us as we are, and this develops intimacy. Either we let hurt destroy our intimacy, or we both determine to heal the ways we hurt each other, which will cause our trust and openness to increase. This then becomes a virtuous circle, and our marriage grows stronger and stronger.
I fell into an affair, and it was a very difficult time in our relationship. But I have come to see, and hopefully have learned very well now, that commitment must be total to marriage, and no form of any other involvement with any other person is acceptable, and commitment is total.
And without commitment, there can't be trust. And without trust, you haven't got the sort of environment in which hurts can be healed and the relationship can grow. So it is fundamental to the marriage relationship.
So, how do we heal the ways we hurt each other? We're going to start by looking at how we instinctively react. Our initial reaction when we're hurt is often anger. While hurt is what we feel in ourselves, anger is what we feel towards the person who's upset us.
Anger is not bad in itself. It's an internal mechanism to show that something is wrong and needs to be sorted out. It's a bit like the warning light in our car that comes on if the engine is overheating and it's urgent we do something about it. We may be angry because we've been unjustly treated or offended, and the adrenaline rush we feel is designed to spur us into action.
But anger can be used wrongly in a number of ways, and we want to look at two. Roughly half of us, if we haven't learnt to control our anger, have a tendency to mishandle it in one way, while the other half have a tendency to go the opposite way.
Some people, when they're angry, are inclined to let you know it right away. We call them the rhinos, because a rhino, if provoked, is quite likely to put down its head and charge at you.
Other people do the opposite. They hide their anger. They become quieter and may withdraw or sulk. We call them the hedgehogs, because a hedgehog, when threatened, curls itself up and sticks out its prickles to keep its attacker at a distance. And it's not that the hedgehogs don't feel their anger, it's just that they display it differently, perhaps by withholding their affection or by suddenly developing selective hearing. Hedgehog behaviour is no less harmful in a marriage than rhino behaviour.
Before the course, communicating my feelings to Paul was just absolutely woeful. Unbeknownst to me at the time, I had a family background which left me with a pattern of behaviour where I tended to shut up shop and just go into no-speak mode when in times of conflict. So that made it very hard that when we actually found this struggle with our son, if I wasn't prepared to talk about it and share my feelings and where I was at, it just made it so difficult for Paul to be able to help me or support me or to work through it together in any way.
Yeah, I think when you're a classic rhino, as I am, and you go like a bull in a china shop, and Carolyn's very much the other way, whereas she hides her feelings, it made me then try and guess where she was at any given time, and more often than not, you get that wrong. After the marriage course, the communication left us very, very open to each other. It's not perfect because it'll never be perfect. We will always grow and grow and grow in it, but we are able to sit and talk about just about any issue because we now have the tools to be able to talk without fear and intrepidation about most of those sorts of things.
Whether we act like the rhino or the hedgehog will depend on a number of things: our personality, what was modelled in our home as we grew up, and our experiences of life since. Many couples are made up of one rhino and one hedgehog, which is true for Scilla and me. The following story will give you a clue as to which way round we are. Kirsty, our first child, was 6 months old, and we were living in Japan. A friend who lived about 4 hours away in Tokyo had invited us to stay for the weekend.
Whenever we went to stay with him, it was always great fun and incredibly busy, as he has amazing energy and is a non-stop entertainer.
Well, on the Wednesday before we were due to go, Scilla told me she didn't feel she could cope with the weekend because of having a small baby and being exhausted. I, on the other hand, was convinced we had to go. I thought it would be rude not to at this late stage. So we had a really heated argument about it.
In the end, I just completely lost it with Nikki.
I remembered the exact spot where Scilla was standing in our apartment, beside the basket where we kept our fruit. She was so angry that she picked up an apple that was on the top and threw it at me really hard. Well, unfortunately for me, the basket was full of apples, and Scilla proceeded to hurl them at me one by one across the room. Well, I managed to escape serious injury by ducking down behind the sofa until the basket was empty.
Now, I know that sounds very dramatic, and I want to assure you that I've never thrown anything else at Nicky, but I can still act a bit like a rhino, attacking him with my words when I feel misunderstood or hurt.
And I tend to act more like the hedgehog. We'll let you know about that story of the apple throwing and how it ended a bit later on. But while Scylla's danger is explosion, my danger is to hold anger or frustration inside. And I've realised it's better to have things out in the open and to express what I feel when I'm upset.
And I've realised it's better, rather than going on the attack, to try to explain more calmly to Nicky what I'm feeling. Rhinos can learn to be more sensitive.
I've always been the rhino and was very prone to charging quite hard. But I have noticed in odd times that Karen has come back as a very charging, prickly hedgehog to me. So we have tended to swap roles, but we've learned through the marriage course, just understanding the hedgehog and the rhino, that it's good just to calm down and just take 5, actually. Just take 5.
Although it's a very amusing way to consider yourself as a rhino or as a hedgehog, it does aptly describe what happens if you're not careful in a place of conflict. But it doesn't have to be that way. And if we know our weakness, then we can actually be very careful about how we respond. And we find, therefore, Paul finds that if he doesn't charge quite so much, then it's easier for me to actually express myself. But I've also learnt that for me to actually dare to say about how I'm feeling and to get the issue out on the table in front of us, it all helps us to resolve the issue in a brand new way. It does take time to alter lifelong habits, but it is possible.
But it's not just couples with opposite tendencies that have problems. If you have 2 rhinos in a marriage or 2 hedgehogs, that can be problematic too.
Well, it's quite interesting, the whole thing about rhinos and hedgehogs, because you probably with your family are a
rhino. Historically, I'm a rhino with my family. I'm half Spanish. My mum's Spanish. My father's English, and we're all rhinos. So it's all kind of chaotic and angry and shouting at each other and charging around like crazy. But with Sarah, I'm definitely more of a hedgehog, because I know you don't respond very well to rhinos, particularly.
So we're probably both hedgehogs. I'm very much a hedgehog. Historically, I used to be in hibernation mode and used to go and hide under my duvet at the first sign of any conflict. That would be my default. Get into bed, hide under the duvet, and I'm not coming out because I couldn't bear conflict. But I think I've got a little bit better as a hedgehog and sort of tend to try not to default to the duvet. And we try and have more conversations. But I think we are 2 hedgehogs, so we have to be careful that we don't just both avoid conflict and that we do tackle issues when they come up.
Arguments are healthy, but both rhinos and hedgehogs must learn to handle anger properly. Uncontrolled anger has terrible consequences. Rhino behaviour can lead to a husband or wife living with the constant fear of the next explosion.
While hedgehog behaviour leads to an erosion of intimacy as resentment builds up and up. Both are damaging and ineffective ways of showing anger.
When they said about rhino and hedgehog behaviour on the course, we just laughed, didn't we? Because it was so transparent to me, and probably everybody who knows us, who's the rhino and who's the hedgehog.
Rachel's the rhino, and I'm the hedgehog. I would say that I don't become extremely prickly, but actually there is that.
Prickly is such a good word for him as well.
Yeah, but there are obviously spikes there that just mean that, you know, if Rachel maybe is trying to come close and we haven't actually dealt with the issue that is causing me to behave in that way, then it does mean that she might, you know, get her fingers hurt.
I charge at 100 miles an hour. Nothing gets in my way. And that was another thing on the marriage course that we realised we're quite extreme, both of us, in terms of that behaviour. And that was something that we needed to really focus on to make sure that we don't hurt each other in our mannerisms and the way we deal with situations.
We want you to ask yourselves now, which one are you? A rhino or a hedgehog? And just in case you're not sure, why don't you take a moment to check with your partner?
We're going to do a quick survey, and if you're watching on DVD, do join in. First of all, how many of you are married to a rhino? Put your hand up. Now, how many are married to a hedgehog? And how many are married to the opposite to yourselves? Usually we find at least half of the couples on the course are married to someone who's the opposite to themselves.
Of course, you may be a hedgehog with rhino tendencies. You let the anger build up inside for some time, and then finally you explode like the rhino. Or you may be a rhino with some hedgehog tendencies. The issue is not whether we hurt each other, but how we deal with the anger or frustration.
Often, the next reaction to hurt is a desire for revenge. We want to retaliate, hurt for hurt, rejection for rejection. We want to show our partner what it feels like to have been upset in this way.
Or our reaction may be fear. We withdraw and build a wall of protection around our heart so as not to be hurt again. If we're like the rhino, our skin will get thicker. And if we're like the hedgehog, our prickles will get longer and a bit sharper.
Then, on top of that, can come guilt. Even though we may feel very hurt ourselves, it'll never be only one way in a marriage. We'll almost certainly have hurt our partner as well.
These effects of hurt, anger, retaliation, fear, and guilt, can lurk beneath the surface of a marriage. The next exercise, called Handling Anger, will help you recognise how you typically respond when you feel hurt. Please take a few minutes to fill in your answers to the questions and then discuss what you've put.
We want to go on now to look at what we do about these reactions to feeling hurt. In the Bible, it says, "In your anger, do not sin." Anger has a purpose, but only for a short time, as the next line makes clear. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the enemy a foothold. Anger must be controlled and not buried. We can't just push the emotions down and expect them to disappear. As one psychologist and marriage counsellor said, an emotion is never buried dead, it is always buried alive.
You know, I find it really hard to believe it when couples tell me that they never have arguments. But I'm not even sure it'd be a good thing if it was true. I know a couple called Paul and Caroline, and they were married for 6 years, and they were still telling people they'd never ever had a row. You'd be at a dinner party with them, no, we never have a crossword, we are so in love. And they didn't. Not till that incredible Christmas day, just over 6 years into their marriage. And when you ask them how it happened, neither of them can really remember. Paul says it was to do with the roll of sellotape. Caroline said it was to do with the turkey. But they had an almighty row. And as they did, hey presto, hurts came tumbling out